to go from homelessness to 10 acres mortgage free on a homestead, and to go from, you know, welfare essentially in food stamps to making close to $500,000 last year. Like, you work very hard. It's almost like a stereotype. I don't like to really perpetuate it, but people do say stuff like, you work like a Jamaican. But putting it into perspective, 90% of the world, from my last understanding, live on less than $50,000 a year.
Hi, everyone. This is Jack Allwile with another money episode. Today, we have very special guest, Makeda Boehm from the Seed and Society podcast, and she's public speaker, homesteader, teacher of the connector method. That we'll get into some of those. Makeda, welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning, Jack. Thank you for having me. Super excited.
So, before we get into some of your ventures and methods, I do like to start out by asking everyone, what was your relationship like with money growing up?
So that is a really great question. My relationship with money was very interesting. So I'm a first generation Jamaican American, on my dad's side. My mom was American, but I grew up with my grandfather, so
Hmm.
not with either of my parents. And he literally came to this country with two suitcases in the 80s, and all of my aunts came here and they were able to go to college, and he owned a home. And my idea of money and my relationship with it was that you work. Like, you work very hard. It's almost like a stereotype. I don't like to really perpetuate it, but people do say stuff like, you work like a Jamaican. Like, it's that idea
Okay.
that you have two or three jobs. And growing up, it was just this idea that you can make it happen for yourself. Especially me, I would often be told, like, you were born here. Like, they had to go through green card and then citizenship process. And when my pop came here, he was like a radio engineer.
Hmm.
But a lot of times when you come to this country, your credentials from your home country aren't
Yeah, I don't.
accepted. So he had to, like, sweep floors at a hospital. He went from being someone who fixed TVs and radios and being very handy to having to clean, um to support his family. And I've always, like, super respected that, and it always just kind of taught me that you can make your own luck, like, as long as you have opportunity, because that's what he'd say, like, you're in the land of opportunity. This is America. So there's really no excuse not to make it happen. And growing up, I didn't realize how poor we were because he never made me feel it. Like, I had a roof over my head, I had food to eat. I didn't realize that he was really bad at managing money, and that's why we ate out all the time. But growing up, my relationship to money was that it can always be made.
Hmm. In like that sentiment, like you're working like a Jamaican, like was inflation really bad? Or, and like, can you kind of talk about like what were they fleeing? Like what made them think America was the land of opportunity?
Yeah, so the Jamaican economy, absolutely. Like, Jamaica is um, the only true industry there is tourism.
Okay.
And it is so Jamaica is it's funny because the whole world knows about Jamaica. I travel everywhere and I'm like, I'm Jamaican, and because of Bob Marley, you know
Uh-huh.
about Jamaica, but you can drive from one end of Jamaica to the other in a day and back. That is how tiny that island is. So it's not a lot of opportunity. Of course, it had to go through the effects of colonialism. It was a British colony for, like, up until, I want to say, the 60s or 70s. So not even an independent nation. And it did have some natural resources, which are bauxite, but it was extracted and taken out of the country. So it doesn't really have a great economy. Of
Okay.
course, I would go there like every December for Christmas and whatever. And it's great when you go there for vacation because it's like, oh, this is paradise. And we'll talk about it later, but that's how I really fell in love with the idea of your own food. Like, I'd be on my great grandma's property. There's mango trees, there's fruit trees, but she was also considered, like, more like well off. well-to-do in the country, but it's a country of extreme inequality, similar
Mm,
to ours, and a lot of haves versus have-nots, and really the struggle to survive. So when you're in Jamaica, like it's a big thing to leave and go what you call to foreign, whether that's Canada, America, the UK, and you send back money or will send back
mm,
barrels to the people who didn't make it out. So yeah, it's
mm.
it's not like there's not a lot of opportunity financially. Um, and of course, this is before like the age of internet, where
Uh-huh.
maybe you could, make it in another way. So yeah.
So it was very common, I guess, in Jamaica to have multiple jobs then. It's kind of like more like side, almost like a side gig culture. Like you have to do like multiple things just to get by.
Absolutely, and
Uh-huh.
entrepreneurship. It's
Yeah.
funny you just said that because I didn't even think of it that way. Like my grandmom, she, who was not with my grandfather, but she had businesses before I was born, and it was very common in my family to be told like that you should make a business, that
Mm,
to work for an employer, um, indefinitely or without like really great compensation is to work to pay yourself and them, which is okay because if they have a great product and they have great benefits, because that was also touted, right? Like you go to school, much to their consternation. I was a liberal arts major.
okay.
And, in Jamaican culture, it's like, no, you need to do finance, you need to do engineering, you need to do computer science. Like I'm sure most immigrant families will
Uh-huh.
tell you. And it was just this idea that you really want to get a great job, you want to have security, but also business and like being an entrepreneur was never frowned on. My grandfather, he worked for, it used to be called Bell Atlantic. Nowadays it's called
Okay.
Verizon,
Ah,
as a phone technician. And when they moved to the South and he lost that job, he became a business owner. He ended up running like the phone lines and everything
mm,
for like Walmart's or the mall or bigger things, and he like started his own business. So for me,
oh.
that was always an option. It wasn't like, hey, you lose this job or you don't get the right opportunity and there's just nothing you can do. And despite how you feel about it, I'm a person who feels like everyone can benefit from assistance from time to time. Like I
Mm,
myself has been on welfare and food stamps, and especially through college. I was on my own since 16, but he was a really big believer in not taking handouts, sometimes to his own consternation. So
uh-huh.
it was like, you can work, you go and work, you go find a job. And he was literally like the first person up, the last person to go to sleep. And that was just my like model for like hard work.
Can you talk us through? I mean, some people's eyes probably perked up when you said you were on your own since 16. Can you
Yeah.
talk through like those years, like leading into young adulthood and what you were up to at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say, as much as love my family, in some ways, people aren't perfect. I don't think that everyone really, like, I think we take for granted Google, right? We
Oh,
take for granted that we can figure out like how to raise somebody and doing the right things. And, um, uh, and some people don't. Some people still don't look into it. But at 16, I think money really became an issue. Just talking about my family. So, like I said, my grandfather wasn't married to my grandmother. He had another wife.
okay.
And she, just to be honest, she didn't like people who weren't hers. I don't like to vilify anyone now. I think getting older, you have a lot more grace and you understand a
Mhm.
lot more nuance and relationships and blended families and all of the dynamics that go into that. But we weren't her grandkids. And it was probably a lot to have children and then you're raising the the grandchildren of your stepchildren essentially,
Uh-huh.
because it was me and my brother. And at 16, I was essentially, he was 18. My brother was a few years older than me, almost like two and a half. And we're living on our own. And um, I don't know if you have a 16-year-old who's living with an 18-year-old boy, but it's not always great, and it really made uh, school a struggle. I've gone to 22 schools, which
Wow. Okay.
is not typical, right? Like up and down the Eastern Seaboard. I went to middle school for a little bit in Ghana. So by 16, I'd already been to 7 high schools. This is like my 10th grade year. In 10th grade, I went to 4 different high schools each semester. And I'm really fortunate. I did really well on standardized tests. I did really well at school. I didn't have to think about it. So when I left high school at 16 and got my GED, I'd left with like a 4.06 GPA. My deal with my grandfather, who I wasn't living with because I was living with my brother, was if I take the GED test and I pass, then I can leave. And he's like, sure. I passed it at like 98th percentile. It wasn't even difficult for me to do. And what I did instead as an alternative senior year to high school is I did AmeriCorps. So I was the youngest
Huh.
person in my corps. You can start at 17. Um, and it's kind of like the Peace Corps in America. And I volunteered. That was like the job. So you got a stipend, which was something like it was like 150 a week, 200 a
Okay.
week, and I'm working like 50 hours a week. That was my first job. And but I worked in underprivileged schools helping address the high school dropout crisis, ironically enough, as a high school dropout. But yeah, it was one of the most formative experiences of my life. I feel like doing AmeriCorps made college like easy. I ended up going to college on time. Um, just because like after your first job is 50 hours a week working in one of the most underprivileged
Yeah.
schools in Philadelphia, dealing with having to handle your own groceries, take the bus to get them, being on assistance in order to make it, you just grow up really quickly and you learn responsibility really quickly. And I'm not glamorizing it, but I also am grateful for those experiences because I know that is what led me to where I am today.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you were uniquely positioned since you bounced around so much, kind of understanding perhaps what some of those kids were going through. Uh,
Absolutely. Like I understood them. And then I also want to be like very clear, like you said, like growing up, it was like I went to Jamaica for December. Like I'd been to England by that time. I went to like part of middle school in Ghana in Africa. Like had went to school in Florida, Virginia, Philadelphia. Like when you travel as much as I did, it really helps you to understand that normal doesn't exist and that there's so many different viewpoints and everything is relative. Of course, I didn't like verbalize it that way as a
mhm,
child, but it shaped my worldview. And that's why I ultimately went into sociology, which is the study of society, because I'd experienced and been exposed to so many different societies that it became kind of like this underlying level of like what makes people tick. And now, as like when I've now built a homestead to go from homelessness to 10 acres mortgage free on a homestead and to go from, you know, welfare essentially in food stamps to making close to $500,000 last year, I can really appreciate that journey. And how it uniquely positioned me to do it.
mhm. Yeah, let's get into like how you made the 500,000 and get into the homesteading.
Yeah, absolutely. So I now live in Tennessee. I love it. I call it my little slice of paradise on top of a mountain. And this is from like I've probably traveled to over 15 countries now. I've been to maybe 30 states. And I just think there's something special about Tennessee. I probably shouldn't say it because I understand now that Tennesseans like to keep it a secret. I think the South likes to keep the South a
Yeah.
secret. And it's like, you can think whatever you want about down here. Great. So you stay away. Um, but it really is amazing. And this is as a Philly girl who loves Philly, but also can just understand some of the constraints. Yeah, 2022 happened. Like COVID happened. I was living in Houston and my husband got really sick during COVID. And I was like, I had a 3 month old at the time, my daughter. And I'm checking the room to make sure he's still breathing.
Oh,
And I was really terrified. When he got better, it took about 2.5 weeks. He refused to go to the hospital, which is why I think he got better, because we didn't know about strains then. We didn't know that you could get exposed to different forms of COVID. And when he got better, we had kind of this opportunity. My father in law lives like less than a mile from us. He's also on 10 acres. And this property came up for sale, and it was 10 acres, a complete gut job. Everything here was a gut job. The room I'm in was literally built by my husband's hands. It's a loft over our living room. It was $80,000 for 10 acres. And we had like barely any pennies to rub together. I was in scientific sales at this point, maybe making 30 or 40,000 a year. So 2019, I'm making maybe 20,000 a year. Like picture that, and that's as a teacher. And like, but like a substitute teacher doing like education services. 2019, I decided I wanted to work from home because I was going to have my daughter and I wanted to nurse. And I knew that that wasn't going to be an option if I had to go into work. And this, you have to remember, is before COVID. So working from home was very much, even more so, a boon. So I was a 1099 contractor for this scientific cells entity. And that's when I really got introduced to commission, but I maybe made in a really good year like 40, 45,000. So this house comes up and we want it, but you can't get a mortgage for a like a fixer upper. It's really, really difficult. I know HGTV makes it seem like, yeah, anyone can get this, but you have to have really great credit. It's a lot. Just like put it that way, it's a lot to get a mortgage for a house that can't be sold right away or have a conventional mortgage, especially when you're a 1099 employee. So you have to have a few years of pay stubs, and it had to be more than what we were making. That's where my mother in law enters, and she cashes out her 401k to purchase this property for us
oh wow.
with the idea that this is when interest rates were like 2 to 3%,
Uh-huh.
with the idea that we were going to fix it up and um, get a mortgage and pay her back. Well, anyone who's ever done a fixer upper now sees why it's so difficult to get a mortgage, because it's never the timeline you think. And my father in law, I'll preface this with saying, is a registered contractor. That is his job.
Okay.
He's a registered contractor, and we have still been in construction for the last 5 years. Like, yes, it's extreme construction. We turned our porch into like a 700 square foot living room. It's custom, it's bespoke, it's a really beautiful house now, but it was a complete gut job. So we are staying at my father-in-law's house in one room, coming here every day to paint, pull up floor, put down things. And long story short, 20, well, not really short, but 2022 is the boom, kind of what people call the great resignation. And you're seeing that everyone's open to work from home opportunities. And that is how I got into tech sales. I was like, hey, we need more money. At this point, we're just paying my mother-in-law maybe like $1,000 a month. She's not stressing us because she trusts us. My husband is literally like the most honorable person I know. So she knows like we're not trying to screw her over or anything, that we will work tirelessly until we can pay her back. Um, and I learned of account executives because I was like, I maybe did it a little unconventionally. I looked up jobs that had salaries that could support where we were at that time, which is like $8,000 in credit card debt and can work from home. And that is how kind of I sat there and maybe applied to 1,000 jobs, to
Wow.
put it in perspective. 1,000, and I got hired in tech SaaS sales as an account executive. This is where the connector method kind of comes in. I talk about it a little bit because I had no idea what SaaS was, which is software as a service. I didn't really know what an account executive did. I was an account manager for those 2 years, but I didn't truly understand because everyone kind of has their terminology. And I took the job anyway. And at this point, that job was $80,000 a year, which was more money than I'd ever heard of, really, at that point. And this is 2022. But my on target earnings, which when you do sales, that's your commissions, was $180,000 a year,
Wow.
which sounded absolutely unbelievable. I did not believe it. And 5 months later, I hit quota because I went into it with such a level of gratitude. And, I'd been a teacher. I like to synthesize information, and I'm very unconventional in the tech space, especially in tech sales space. Of course, at my company, I was the only person in tech sales who looked like me. Um, but I had a really great manager who really took me under his wing and been doing it for a decade. The next year, I'm pregnant with my second child, and I feel like that stalled me a little bit because, your body's just going through a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite hit quota, which I took very, very personally. I took it so personally that by 2024, when I got my quota, I was determined to not only hit quota, but exceed it to make up the quota I didn't make for the previous year.
Okay.
And I ended that year at 207% quota, the number one salesperson at the entire company by quota attainment, and close to $500,000 after
Wow.
commission.
That's amazing. There's so many like things in what you just said that we could dive into, but like I get the sense like that you would agree with like as you take action or you have something to work towards, like you kind of change as a person. Like you take action and then you're in this different environment, you're different headspace. You said you kind of have a different type of gratitude that you're working with. I mean, when you're looking back at the sales job, I guess could you tell us what type of software you were actually selling, and is there anything you really like point to and say like this is why I was able to sell so much?
Oh, 1,000,000%. I don't even have to think about that, Jack, having
Uh-huh.
children. I think a lot of
Okay.
times we like to talk about that being a disadvantage, especially because, within the first year, almost over 50% of women will leave the workforce because of care and just like child giving. We have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in developed nations, like in the world. Oh, and as a Black woman, I have a 300% higher chance of dying in childbirth, and that affected me a lot. That changed a lot of how I perceived just kind of work. Both times I gave birth, I had C sections. I was in my hospital bed a few hours later doing work emails at both jobs,
Amazing.
even though I
Okay.
technically had maternity leave.
Uh-huh.
And that's because a lot of times this is tied to your worth. We live in a country where your salary and your income a lot of times determines how people treat you. And I'm intimately aware with that as somebody who came from a whole lot of nothing and then having something, right? Because you always have you. And you understand that. But for me, my driving factor, 1,000,000%, are my children. It is why I do everything that I do. It's why I try to build the legacy I build. And it's why I'm really intentional about my time. Like I even homeschool now. And that's because even though I work from home, a lot of times, I'm like, I'm on the computer, I have a meeting. I'm very intentional about making sure I spend time with them now while they're young, because what is the point of having money if you don't have
Yeah.
time freedom? And what's the point of, having like giving your children a whole lot of things when all they really want is time with you? So that has fueled everything that I do. It's why I push through on the hard days. I mean, last year I lost my mom, and that was really really challenging for lack of a better, like, talk about
Uh-huh.
understatement
Yeah.
of the century. It changed everything because I'd had my highest commission month. I think I checked my bank account and I had a commission check for like $115,000
Amazing.
in 1 month. And a week later, my mom passed away. And it put it very much into perspective that you cannot pay for the things that are most important, which is your, like, you can do things that help you be healthier, but you can't pay for time, like in a lot of ways. And that to me is what drives everything that I do now. It's why for some it could seem weird that I left the position that I was at. But I'm still in tech sales. So what I did last year, I sold HR software, usually to higher education institutions. And
Okay.
now I sell kind of like constituent engagement software to government institutions. I
Okay.
will say, just from experience, it's not quite as lucrative as you'd expect, but it is very purposeful. I
Mhm.
feel like I'm able to give back. And this is just funny because I applied to so many nonprofits who never hired me, which I'm grateful for. In
Mhm.
retrospect, but for me, it's always been about a social mission as well. Like, how can I make life better for people through like what it is that I'm doing? And so that's where going into more constituent engagement and communications for citizens to react and relate better to their elected officials and their public servants. That to me was just more of a like lifestyle synergy match, while I get to stay in the field which I love, which is sales, because I am a huge believer in sales. I think that it is just getting people connected to the value that they need. I think of selling as sacred, especially when you do it from a place of connectivity, which again comes in with the connector method. Everyone needs something. They buy it, whether they go to the store and pull it off the shelves, whether they get an idea, whether they get a service. And until I feel like we as a society see it as what it is, especially when people do it with great intentions, um, that a lot of people will be better off.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so many great
Yeah.
things. I mean, one thing that kind of stands out is like a lot of people are scared to like, you know, take a little break from their job or maybe have a kid because they're always thinking of like the negative things that can happen. But like your story shows, like if you like certain things trigger positive, unexpected things to happen, and like I feel like we don't really think about to the optimistic side of things enough.
Exactly. I think like for me, I love that you said that because I'm a very optimistic person. It is what people have said about me so much. They're just like, hey, you're like the most optimistic. You always think of the good side. Like, I love me a good affirmation. And I think that that comes from the perspective of like perspective. Like I said, I went to middle school in Ghana, and I say this to say I saw 3-year-old girls at the stoplight selling pencils so they could buy their school books, because that's how important education was to them, that they were willing to go out and sell pure water or anything to try to get the money so that they could learn something that we take for granted here. And this
Yeah.
is me and my 12-year-old mind. It's why I think travel is so crucial and so important, because I feel like here, especially in America, like we're 4% of the world's population, but we hold something like 90% of the
Yeah.
world's wealth. And even within that, there's so much disparity. But putting it into perspective, 90% of the world, from my last understanding, live on less than $50,000 a year. And over almost 50% of the world does not have running water and showers. Like something we take to be so like obvious,
Yeah.
right? Like even
Yeah.
at my lowest, I can go to a gym, I can go to a Planet
Yeah.
Fitness, I can go
Yeah.
where, a YMCA, and I can take a shower. That is something that a lot of the world does not have, especially not running hot water. I think when you have that perspective, you cannot really be that down on yourself for that long. Like, even when I did City Year, I'm making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to hand out to the homeless. Every Friday we're doing a service project. So we're at homeless shelters. We're like, that is my core, like my base of really understanding how service is the quickest way to get out of your own way. Like, instead of worrying about you, worry about what you can give the world. And that just shifts it, because we are so incredibly fortunate to be in this amazing country of opportunity and resources. Even if you just have proximity to resources, that there's almost no way, if you're willing to work and look for opportunity, that you can't get out of whatever situation you're in. And I feel so strongly about that it's one of those things where it's almost like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you can go, even if you have to save up those checks and you go work at McDonald's, you go work at Walmart, like, this is noble work. It is work. It is opportunity. And if you do it with a plan, one check seeds the other one, and then you can figure it out. And now we live in the creator economy. By 2027, it's projected to be a little under $500 billion industry. There is absolutely no reason, if you have an iPhone or you have some kind of camera or access to something, that you don't have a podcast, that you don't have a YouTube channel, that you're not going in with strategy. There's just so much free information online about how to make money, that I don't really have a lot of sympathy for people here who are like, well, I can't do that. And I think it's really important that I work full time still. I am not a believer in quit your job and just go for it. I think that's bullcrap if you have the option. I think there's absolutely people who get laid off and they can focus and maybe accelerate their growth a little faster. But if you have a 9 to 5 and you are able to do your job very well, and that hour or 5 hours you'll use to binge Netflix, you use it instead to binge some content so that you can make your own content that weekend. You get up an extra hour earlier or you sleep a little later to build something for yourself, even just a multiple income stream. I just feel like you can have excuses or you can have results. That's how I've always looked at life.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, a lot of Americans are having trouble with housing. And I guess you guys kind of saw an opportunity with this homestead. Can you kind of talk about growing your own food and the opportunity that exists for people to maybe build a little bit more freedom through a somewhat unconventional way for most people, like, growing your own food and making freedom, getting freedom that way?
Absolutely. So I preface this by saying I know I'm extremely fortunate with my husband's family. Like, my husband is an Army veteran. He has owned his food for a long time, but we have both slept in our cars, right? Like, we understand what it is, and even just the fortunate to have a car. Um, to have to make it in ways when you didn't have like a lot of income. And I'll be honest too, like, his family, for him, wasn't willing to support him until it was like, oh, I'm having a child. And this was pretty early in us, like, re getting back together. And it was like they felt very passionate about their grandchildren not being affected by our inability to grow the heck up at that point, just to
Hmm.
be honest. um and for me, I'd never had like a month or somewhere I could stay where I was able to sit there and really look for like a job, because I, like, to put it in perspective, I graduated on a Friday from college. I was working on Monday. I worked
Wow.
almost 3 jobs through college. So I'm taking courses, I'm waiting tables, I'm doing work study, I'm tutoring, I'm going to class. Like, it was always on this cycle, because I knew I was one paycheck away from homelessness, one paycheck away from being kicked out or not being able to make rent. So never had time to sit down and just reflect on what strategy makes more sense for me to move
Mm.
forward. And so I say that to say I am very intimately aware with housing insecurity, very intimately aware with just not knowing how to make it next. And that is why I give this advice that you can make it for yourself if you get really strategic and you take in information from people who have done it. What I learned is that a lot of times when you don't have it all figured out, you like to think you know everything and no one can tell you anything and you're not coachable. And what I learned really from my husband was the benefit of shutting up and listening, and not just to him, but like when I got into this tech role, he's like, you take it all in. Like a lot of these things, like everyone you work with are not going to be people that you necessarily like. It doesn't mean you can't learn from them. I think that that has become very important, especially in this age that we have of division and divisiveness, and either you're all the way left or you're all the way right, and there's no in the middle, which is crap. Most people are in the middle. And it became very important that, as my pop would say, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So just because I don't agree with you on 90% of the things you say doesn't mean that I can't hear the truth or can't parse out for myself the 10% of the things you're saying that I can apply and be helpful in my life. So I tie that into homesteading. What happened to me is, as somebody who has had so much housing insecurity, um, even as I made that money last year, I looked and it was like all of my income is based on one source of income.
Mhm.
Um, I even feel like a 401k is one source of income. Even though you diversify your portfolio, it still works on everything working right, the government working right for you to get a return on that. Like the stock market is still a gamble, and I am not a fan of gambling. So I like to invest in like real assets, real property. It's why it was a big deal for us to have this property mortgage free. I could have easily gotten a mortgage, rolled it in, and got a certain rate after we fixed it up, and had a monthly payment plan while I used, my money to go all in on the stock market. That didn't feel like security to me, because what you learn is a lot of people who have a mortgage, they have 4 or 5 bad months, they lose their job, they lose their house. So that was really big with me to make sure that we owned our property outright so that we had more flexibility in life, like life
Mhm.
happening. And then it was taking it a step further. So I like to say on my podcast, that we're not preppers, just to put
Mhm.
it in perspective. So we like to be super prepared for like a lot of situations that can happen. And I don't think you can ever be overly prepared. I mean, like I live on a computer every day, so I like my electricity. I like tech. I don't want things to not work. But I think that COVID, if it taught us anything, is that expect the unexpected. And my life, if it taught me anything, is to expect the unexpected. So we like to make sure we have a whole bunch of dry canned foods. We have, gallons of water. We have running water on our property. And the next level of that was growing our own food. It also came from groceries are really expensive. They
Mhm.
are
Yeah.
really expensive, and we are only organic here, and that's not from "Oh, we're just so bougie or uppity." It's from, "Hey, I have children and I don't wanna give them glyphosates. I don't wanna give them food exposed to Roundup, which can give them cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma." Like, we have too many studies now of like, if you need to put on a mask to put something on the food and it cannot touch your skin, then what do you think it's doing when you ingest it?
Yeah.
So for me, it just really became a big deal of making sure that I am protecting my children's health as much as possible. And it is not easy. Homesteading is not a walk in the park. It's not, you put it in the ground, you see what happens, even though I do a lot of chaos gardening now where I throw the seeds out there and I see what happens. But Yeah, that was a really big part of us for reason that we wanted fertile land, that we understood that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity in a lot of ways. Literally, since we've bought this house, our property value has close to quadrupled
Wow.
um, in the span of what, 4 or 5 years. So it has paid off big time. And I know that that's not accessible to everyone, but you, of all people, Jack, know about land flipping, which I bought to my audience. So that's actually bullcrap. If you're willing to buy raw land, in a lot of places, it's a lot less expensive than buying that, curb appeal property,
Mhm.
and you can do the same thing. Especially if you're willing to, get like a tiny house or an RV or a trailer as you build up to your dream property. And the cool part about it is that people love that content. People love homesteading content. They love um, building content, construction content, and that can actually pay to fund your build as you're going along and doing it. So there's just like, if you have some internet, you have options.
Yeah. Can,
Because
can
I
you
live
give
in
us
a
a
town with
flavor
no
of,
stoplights, to put it
can
in
you
perspective.
can you give us a flavor of what you're growing right now?
Oh yeah. Oh, so we're vegan mostly. My children are not. My daughter, like she's 5. She loves to claim to be a proud carnivore. So down
Okay.
at Mama and Papa's house, they have goats and they have chickens
All right.
and all the things there. Here right now, I'm growing like 7 types of beans. I actually harvested some radishes yesterday. That was my first time growing anything from seed. So to put in
Wow.
perspective, I am not a seasoned homesteader. I just grew starting in July my first things from seeds and already have a harvest. I have a
Wow.
ton of basil, dill, any like oregano. I have beans growing in. I planted potatoes last night. I was so excited. I have some potatoes growing, but I did another set of potatoes. Even though we're close to a frost, I'm like, let's see what we get. Maybe we still get some minis because I bought, like I said, we buy organic food. So if you're buying organic food, it goes bad quickly if you don't eat it, as food
Sure.
should. If your food is sitting there and it's not going bad, that's not good. It's essentially like organic matter should decay. I'm growing a lot of cucumbers. I have sweet potatoes, tomatoes, squash. I did a whole bunch of winter squash. Can't wait to see that growing up, and a ton of peppers. We
Okay.
like peppers here. So I think that's what I have planned. Oh, we even have watermelon growing, and that's because we
Nice.
had a watermelon that sat a little too long. We didn't like it. We just put it in our ground, and now we have like a whole watermelon grove coming up. I have some that are like this big already, just growing. You put it in the ground,
Awesome.
you water it, you see what happens. So that is the best thing about growing food. And I do want to say this for a lot of people who may not have, 10 acres. To be fair, we have about 2 cleared acres, and over 7 of our acres are heavily wooded. So I do want to do some mushroom cultivation. But I also have my arrow garden. My arrow garden is producing herbs like crazy. I have lettuce that's growing out of it. That sits on my kitchen counter. And then you can do a green stalk. And these are things I have in like my connectors, as I call it, because I explain like the value of it. And then I have like affiliate links in it, because that is, again, another way to make some kind of passive income. These green stalks take up this tiny square space and they can go up to 7 rows high. You can do that on a balcony anywhere, and you can grow carrots in it. Oh, so I'm also growing carrots. You can grow kale. You can grow um, radishes, beets, anything. And it literally, like, I could fit it in the space behind me
Wow.
right here. So, just to say that there is vertical gardening, there are ways that you can garden no matter how small you think your space is, as long as it gets sun. And they even just made a new tray where you can put it under and it can drain in the tray and you take it out. So, even if you don't necessarily have an outdoor space. So, if you have a kitchen counter or you have this much space, you can be growing your own fresh food for relatively inexpensive. It's like
Awesome.
$100.
Awesome. Are,
Yeah.
are there any like resources that when you were starting out were really helpful with homesteading?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a big believer in mentorships. Now, I think once I got on my founder's journey, I've learned that it is worth it to pay to skip the trial and
Yeah.
error because I'm a person who thinks of my time as being priceless. And if I am taking a year or 2 years or even super months to figure out something that 9 out of 10 times someone has a course to teach you, that is, it's a no-brainer to me. So I've joined the Confident Gardener Mentorship.
Okay.
It is run by like Amber at Grace Walk Farms. She has like 600,000 followers on Instagram. And there's a reason why, because she gives so much value. In her farm, she grows 100% of her family's food organically in her little like backyard. It's like less than like an acre. And then Whispering Willow Farm with Joe Reagan, who also wrote, I can show you this. Do I have it here? Oh yeah. I don't know if you see. We literally have floor to shelf book farms everywhere. So she wrote this book, and she's my gardening
Cool.
mentorship, The Tiny But Mighty Farm. And she's
Cool.
on 4 acres. And it's been amazing. It literally, I thought that it would take me 3 years to grow my family's food 100%. And after I did their gardening mentorship in the summer, and now I'm in the fall one, which they recently launched, I now feel like I can do it in a season.
Awesome.
So it is worth it to pay to accelerate past the things that you don't know. And then I also did the Healthy Patch um, gardening course. They're like in Australia, but they give really great information on the nutrients and how, how nutrient dense your food is directly tied to the minerals in your soil. Because as humans, we get minerals through the food, but the food that you're growing gets its minerals through the soil. So if you have
Mm,
nutrient deficient soil and it doesn't have a lot of minerals or all of like how we talk about our microbiome, then you can't get that from the food. That's why you have some food that's very leafy, leafy greens that are very vibrant, and then some that are yellow. And it's
mm,
showing you like a nutrient deficiency. And I thought that was such an important extra context on what it is that I'm growing because I'm not only growing because I want to be prepared, but I'm also growing to make sure that my children have the most nutrients and the healthiest food possible. Yeah, and there's just a
awesome.
ton of books, information,
Yeah.
all the things. Like there's so much free stuff online. Like
Yeah.
I pointed them out because they literally have YouTube channels, they have Instagram channels, and they have access to a lot of this information. But if you need a little bit more hand holding, weekly calls, responses to, hey, what's eating my tomato plant? Why is it looking like this? That's where the mentorship takes it to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
And
for
chat
me,
GPT.
like there was a big transition in between viewing things as just like an expense versus like an investment. Like sometimes people just see the money going out, like, oh, I'm gonna pay this guy like how much? But like how much are they gonna save you? So like that's kind of or yeah, what is the investment on that? So cool. Well, Makeda, it's been great talking to you. Where can the listeners go learn more about you or get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I do have seedandsociety.com. That is always kind of like the start. I am a keynote speaker, so I am formulating some of those offers on there and showing people. I have the connector method, the book coming out. I have the connector method mini course coming out. So you can always go and join that wait list. It's really just about learning how to monetize with what you have now, like getting what you want with what you know. And you can always, I do actually recommend this the most. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have questions, I am not some inaccessible person. I will respond to my messages. LinkedIn, join my newsletter, go to my website, um, anything that you want to know. And thank you so much, Jack, for having me on. This has been absolutely incredible. And I, if you take nothing else from me, I just want you to know that it is possible for you, that if I have done it, you can do it. You do not, like, especially for the American audience, and people who are in developed nations, you have a lot of access, but even if you are listening to this, it means you have internet, and that means you have choices.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We'll
Yeah.
have links to all of that. Take care.
Take care.